Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you again to another evening of local history. This evening we have no pictures for you, and we're not going to go way back to the days of Colonel Talbot or Colonel Burwell or any of those people. I have as my guest tonight Alderman Peter Laing, who has spent 43 years in municipal politics in one way or another. 38 out of 43 years. A couple of times he was defeated in an election. We're going to talk really about the history of St. Thomas in this last 43 years and some of the things that have happened. Now, Pete, I'd like to welcome you to the program very much. And I'd like you to start out by telling us when you were born and when you came to Canada, where you went to school.
Well, George, thank you. I was born in Scotland, a town called Bathgate between Edinburgh and Glasgow, in the year 1903. My father was a coal miner, and we came to Canada in 1912. We sailed just about a few days after the Titanic disaster. The Titanic sunk, as you remember. It was the unsinkable ship, and it went down in April 1912, and the early part of May we sailed on the Royal Allen Line, the Hesperian, and landed in Quebec and came through to Canada. We came through on the old Granny, the old
Grand Trunk.
Grand Trunk, we called it the Granny. It was the passenger train which ran for many years. We came into St. Thomas, and we were met there by a man who had another Scots family who had come over a year before. And they met us with a horse and democrat and took us out into Yarmouth Heights.
Where was the station at the Grand Trunk in 1903?
Where it is today. Exactly where it is today. There's no change. The buildings are the same as they were in 1912 when we came in, yes.
You mean the station that's now the Pennsylvania?
No, the Grand Trunk down there.
We're on...
just on Station Street.
On Station Street,
yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
So they took you out to Yarmouth Heights.
Yeah, we lived in Yarmouth Heights for a few years, and not many, and we came into St. Thomas. And I went to school in Yarmouth Heights, and then I went into Balaclava Street School, and my education was finished here. I went as far as the entrance class, which was senior fourth.
Yes, I think our viewers would know that better as grade 8, and that was the terminal year for most people's education at that time, wasn't it?
That's right.
So how old were you when you got through grade 8?
I was 13 years old.
And then you went out to look for a job.
I went to work.
You'd be arrested now if you went out that early and tried to get a job. So what did you do? Where'd you go?
I went up to the west end of the city where the Erie Ironworks was. The Erie Ironworks still operating, and I started to work there, and I received 5 cents an hour. We worked a 10-hour day, 7 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning till 6 at night, and 6 days a week.
Well, tell me something, Pete. At 5 cents an hour, you wouldn't have very much money for non-essential. Did you walk?
I walked every day. I was there for about a year. I walked every day for about a year. Walked from Woodruff Avenue, where we were staying at that time, right to the extreme west end of town where Mansion Towers are now. That's where the old Erie Ironworks was located.
And the Erie Ironworks is still a firm that's now run by David Thwaites, one of our old industrial firms in St. Thomas.
That's right.
Has a very long history.
That's right.
Well, then, Pete, you stayed there a year. Did you get any raises when you were there?
Yes, I had 3 raises.
What did you end up making an hour?
Well, I can't recall. I can't recall, but I can always remember starting at a nickel an hour.
Well, where did you go from the Erie Iron?
I went from there to the Michigan Central, and I went in there as a laborer into the Michigan Central, into the car department of the Michigan Central, and I worked there as a laborer, and then I went on into the apprenticeship as a machinist apprentice. I served 4 years as a machinist apprentice and graduated from that apprentice school.
Can I ask you a question
Yes.
there? What would you be paid as an apprentice in the Michigan Central and when you were learning your trade?
Oh dear, I don't know whether it was 25 or 26 cents an hour or something like that. I've completely forgotten what it was, but I don't think it was 30 cents an hour. We worked 4 years as an apprentice there, and then following that, I went to work at the C&O, or the Pyramarquette, as it was called in those days. I worked as a spare machinist out there for a year, and then I was recalled back into the Michigan Central as a machinist. And I was in the machinist in the car department for over 50 years.
When did you retire from?
1968. I retired after over 50 years.
Now, well, now let's leave that for a while. Now, it was during the time you worked at the Michigan Central that you were telling me Ford brought in his phenomenal wage of $5 a day.
$5 a day. Yes, this was revolutionary in those days because no one had ever, in the history of industry, had ever given a $5 a day, and Ford brought that in, and of course that revolutionized the automobile industry and every other industry.
Well, did that caused raises really in all the industries?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
In those days, the trade unions were just coming in. I went in 1918. I joined the trade union, and I was a member for over 50 years in the trade union.
Pete, one thing you were saying too about those early years, St. Thomas had quite a public transportation system then.
Yes. We had what we called the bobtails. They were streetcars, and the bobtail. They were called the bobtail because the wheels, the carriage was in the middle, and when they went along, they were hooked up to the trolley. They were a trolley car. And we had what was known as the belt route. The belt route. This was around the circumference of the city, and they went out to Pinnever Park or to any of the other popular areas. They would go downtown and wait for the theaters to close at night, and I can remember the old Duncan Opera House on Talbot Street on that west end, where the bobtails used to meet and get the crowds of people who came out from the evening show.
Well, listen, talking about the Opera House, what did you do? You didn't make a very big salary during that apprenticeship period in your first years of working. What did you do for amusement?
Well, of course, costs are relative.
Yeah.
While I say we got 5 cents an hour, eggs and butter and bread and these things were relative. The costs were relative. In those days, I can always remember going into from the YMCA into Angus Taylor's, and we would get a quarter of a pie and heaped up with ice cream for 10 cents. Now, this, as I say, all costs are relative.
Yeah.
Now, in those days,
where was the YMCA when you were attending it?
Right where it is today.
Right where it was today.
It's today. My father helped to build the Y as an immigrant coming in. The only jobs was construction, and Ponsford, a well-known contractor in the city of St. Thomas, a well-known name in our city. He was the main contracting man at that time, and my dad worked for him. And I can remember them building the YMCA.
Yeah. Well, now we got sidetracked there a little bit on the building of that and that big piece of pie and ice cream for 10 cents. What other amusements did you have besides there was the Duncan Opera House, there were movie theaters?
Well, there were movie theaters. Those were the old silent movie days. There was no sound in those theaters at that time. They all had an orchestra pit, and with an orchestra there, and then they had a vaudeville. And some of the strong men, some of the weightlifters, some of the ventriloquists, some of the acrobats, some of the dancers, the greatest dancers, because these people came from the Keith circuits in the United States, the vaudeville circuits in the United States, and of course they were the top entertainers.
And they when you're speaking of that Keith circuit, that's Chicago, Detroit,
yes,
then St. Thomas was a stopover, then Buffalo and New York.
Right. That's right.
So that really St. Thomas had saw the top performers of their day, eh? The tap dancers and jugglers and all that. Did you ever see W.C. Fields?
No, never. No.
Who were some of the outstanding ones you saw?
Well, I can't recall because I was pretty young in those days. I can always remember the strongmen that used to lift the pianos, and I think we had Louis Cyr, who was
you had Louis Cyr, the Canadian strongman.
One time he was supposed to be reputedly the strongest man in Canada. He could pick up a platform with 10 or 15 men on it, you know. And
well, how did he do that? He get underneath the platform?
Get underneath the platform and hold them up, and then he would pull a team of horses and one thing and another. But then, of course, in those days too, every theater had a stage for this vaudeville performance, and they would have the stock companies would come in. These were traveling companies. Sometimes they were known as the Chautauqua. But the Chautauqua was more historical than that. But the stock companies, there was the Mark Brothers and famous stock companies who came in, and they put on a series of plays. They'd be here all week, and of course there was packed audience came to these shows.
What were some of the outstanding shows you?
Well, there was 10 Nights in a Barroom.
You actually saw that one,
did yes. You? And Abbey's Irish Rose was another one where it had a phenomenal run on the stage in New York, and the stock companies brought it round to the smaller centers. And
you were telling me you thought that was the greatest play.
I think that was one of the finest that impressed me the most. It was a semi-religious. And there was the priest, the rabbi, and the minister on the stage, and they were all discussing the various related religions, their own particular religion. And I can always recall, I believe it was the rabbi or the priest who said, well, we're traveling different roads, but we're on the same track to the same place. So
well, did you ever see Uncle Tom's Cabin?
Yes, yes.
What about Ben Hur?
No, never saw Ben Hur. We saw Uncle Tom's Cabin in different variations. Yeah.
Well, now you were also saying, as well as all the Duncombe Opera House and the movies, you were saying that the churches all had dramatic societies.
Yes, the churches always had dramatic, most of them had dramatic societies. And we put on a lot of good plays in the church. You'd probably be surprised to know that I, at one time, took the part of Prince Charming in Cinderella. You can hardly believe that.
Well, I'll believe you, Pete, but I don't know whether a whole lot of other people will or not. But we're getting past the stage when we look like Prince Charmings, aren't we?
For sure.
Well, and what church was that?
That was in Alma Street Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
That's the only church I ever, all the years I've been here.